By the way, you know which fan base probably had the best week in the Big 12? That would be the Iowa State Cyclones. I'm Pete Mundo, Heartland College Sports Weekly, part of heartlandcollegesports.com. Thanks so much for joining us, whether it's the radio show, podcast, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it might be. Check us out in all those places. Your independent Big 12 home. So huge news this week that Iowa State fans were jumping for joy on. And that is that Urban Meyer is going to retire after the Rose Bowl. Now you're thinking, oh, no, Urban Meyer's retiring. Ohio State's going to go after Matt Campbell, the Ohio kid who has made Iowa State a legitimate contender at the Big 12 and Power 5 level. Here we go. This is it. Matt Campbell's gone for good. No, that's not what happened here. It didn't happen because they have Ryan Day, their 39-year-old offensive coordinator, a guy who was the interim head coach earlier this season when Meyer was suspended, due to the whole Zach Smith thing. Okay, cool, hook 'em, right? I mean, that's Tom Herman would say. But seriously, that was a disaster for Urban Meyer. Ryan Day, the interim head coach, fills in. And apparently Ohio State viewed this Meyer-Day situation very similar to a Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley type of situation, which is interesting when you think about it. And I never put two and two together. Now, I remember when Ryan Day was talked about as being the interim head coach, that this was a guy who a lot of teams had interest in and somebody who, teams were looking to hire either after last season, after this season, whatever it might be. But I did not think Urban Meyer was going to retire this year. I thought he might do it next year and the next couple of years. No, he did it this year, right now, and Iowa State fans can breathe a sigh of relief. Not only are you going to the Alamo Bowl against Washington State, but you confirm the fact that unless something happens with Ryan Day, and it might not work out after 2, 3, 4 years, unless Brian Kelly steps away and Notre Dame calls up Matt Campbell, I can't see him leaving. I don't see it. I'm looking at the other Big Ten jobs, like let's say a Wisconsin or a Northwestern, because that's really Matt Campbell's roots, right? I mean, those are the jobs that you think about. I think at this point they're lateral moves because of what he's built in Ames, not just culturally, but on the field. And Iowa State's that kind of a weird, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but kind of that weird team where they're almost in that Big 12, well, they really are, in that Big 12 West footprint. I mean, geographically, Big 10 West, they can certainly recruit areas the Big Ten's recruiting. A kid that's willing to go to Nebraska from Illinois is probably willing to go to Iowa State, right? I mean, you're splitting hairs and travel depending on where you're going and where you're coming from. So there's a lot of things to sit there and say, Matt Campbell's basically got what he needs. And as long as Iowa State continues to give him the resources, which there's nothing we've seen saying that that's not going to happen, geez, I mean, this guy really could stay in Ames forget 5 years, you could get him for 10. And if you told me after last year, what's the over-under of Matt Campbell at Iowa State, I probably would have put it at around 4.5 or 5.5, right? Is that unfair? That's what I would have done. So the fact that now this guy's looking at, forget 5, and this will be 3, I know that coaches move all the time and anything can happen, right? The old cliche. But if you're putting a wager on it right now, are you taking the over-under 5 years on Matt Campbell? I'm probably taking the over just because I'm looking at the tea leaves around the country, and I believe there's a select few jobs he would leave for. He's not going to the West Coast. I mean, the fact that he was even tied to the USC job, had that job ever opened up if Clay Helton was fired, he was not going to take that job. He wasn't going to go out to the West Coast. He's not a West Coast guy. It would have been a big-time Big Ten job. I mean, maybe Jim Harbaugh blows himself out of Michigan and they give a call to Matt Campbell. But even so, that's a weird fit, and he's an Ohio kid. Would he really want to go up north, right? Would he want to be with the team up north? I guess money talks, but I'd be surprised by that. So great news for Iowa State fans this week. More power to them. They are living large right now in Ames. And I know that Iowa State fans knew that this team could get back to contention, but to get back to where it is and the success that it's having, and to look at 2019, a way too early 2019 look and say, this team can compete for a Big 12 championship next year. They have their quarterback for at least the next 2 years, probably the next 3, unless Brock Purdy suddenly finds himself as, a top 15 NFL draft pick after his junior season. You got your quarterback for the next 3 years. You got to improve the offensive line. You have solid pieces on defense, arguably the best defensive coordinator in the conference. What more can you ask for right now if you're an Iowa State fan? I mean, you got to pinch yourself sometimes. You really do. So Oklahoma State coach Mike Gundy, he reimbursed an Oklahoma City radio personality who bet $250 on the Cowboys to win more than 8 games in Las Vegas before the season. Ron Benton, part of the Morning Animals down in Oklahoma City, lost the bet when Oklahoma State, of course, did not reach that number and finished 6-6. Why you would bet the over on Oklahoma State winning 8 games? Before the season, I had them pretty low. I had them, I think, 8th in the conference. And I thought this team would win 5, 6, and I got a lot of predictions wrong, all right? I'm not going to sit here and act like I got them all right. I got a lot of predictions wrong, but I got a few right. And one of the ones I got right was Oklahoma State. When you lose that duo of Mason Rudolph and James Washington, you don't just turn that thing around in a year, especially when it was looking like at the time they were going to have to go with a true freshman at quarterback or a fifth-year senior. And I know the offense wasn't normally the problem this year. It was defense. It was, it was at times offense, the offensive line especially. It was kind of weird play calling at times. It was lack of focus at times. It was a lot of strange things. But Ron Benton said that Gundy wrote a letter addressed to him that included a personal check for $250. And he said in the letter, the rumor is you bet on our team and lost your money. We came up short. So I thought the manly thing to do is reimburse a guy for believing in our team. Well, I got a message here from Mike Gundy. I don't know if you knew this. I kept this private, but I bet $10,000 on Oklahoma State to hit the over. So, I'll take the check whenever you got it. Okay. Whenever you're ready, Coach Gundy, I will take the check, and please do send it to Kansas City. Hit me a DM on Twitter. I'll get that number to you ASAP, give you my apartment number, and away we go. Does that work for you? Yeah, was it $10,000 or $100,000? I think it was actually $100,000. So, yeah, there you go. I was like, all right, well, good for Mike Gundy, paying up on a bet. $250. Texas freshman safety Caden Stearns expected to be available for the Sugar Bowl. Suffered a knee injury during Saturday's Big 12 championship game. Stearns, the Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year, left the Longhorns game against OU, did not return. That's a big deal. As I said, every fan for OU and every fan for Texas should be rooting for the other team, and every Big 12 fan in general should be rooting during bowl season for OU and Texas going up against Alabama and Georgia, the 2 SEC heavyweights. You got to be pulling for those 2 teams. We all should be pulling for those 2 teams in those Big 12 SEC matchups. And before we head out here, Alex Delton transferring for Kansas State, the quarterback. Not shocked. He lost out on the battle of Skylar Thompson. Not a huge loss. Not a huge loss. But I'm also not going to say it's not a big deal because – Kansas State's lost 25 players from the program the past couple of years. That was part of the underlying problem for Bill Snyder. It wasn't just that he, wasn't up to snuff, per se, on some of the modern day college football things, like the fact that players can transfer much more easily, the fact that they can play in 4 games and still have a red shirt. It felt like he was archaic in a lot of ways in what he was doing this season. But I don't blame Alex Delton for saying, you know what, I'm out. I can play right away because he's graduated. Let me see where I can go, who wants my services, and move on from there. But it is a big loss because Skylar Thompson got better as the season went along. You saw some of those throws at the end of the year, like against Texas Tech, that he would not have made last season or even earlier this season. So it's a big deal for him. But it leaves Kansas State thin again at another position. So something to keep an eye on if you're a Wildcats fan. Pete Mundo, Heartland College Sports Weekly, part of heartlandcollegesports.com. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Being a part of the show, we'll be back next week. Same time, same place, right here on Heartland College Sports Weekly. All right, YouTube, Facebook, appreciate you guys. Please do share and subscribe this. We also have this on our podcast. We also do a radio show, so check it all out. heartlandcollegesports.com. Thanks so much, guys. And we'll talk to you soon.